Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. Very happy new year to you, wherever you are in the world. I'm going to be talking about major themes for 2023 in this video. And obviously I'll be filling in the detail with all of my bi-monthly updates as we go through the year. But this is going to be a very different year from the last three. We had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which was very strong through 2020, 2021. That was kind of striking that monotone note of contraction, control, lockdown, etc. And then also overlapping that through 21 and 22, we had that important square between Saturn and Uranus that's now moving away. That was the old world versus the new, control versus freedom, centralization versus decentralization. Some of those themes to some extent are going to continue through this year, but this is going to be a much bigger year of change. This is a huge, I think it's a huge turning point for humanity, 2023. It will really be a watershed year. It will be a much faster moving year. At times it is going to be chaotic at the 3D level, no doubt, because of the breakdowns in the old systems we're going to have. But we don't have to live at the 3D level. As far as you're able, try and unplug from the 3D level and try and live in a different place of peace and calm, and really creating your own reality that I talk so much about in every video, because it's going to get a little wild at the 3D level, because there is so much change coming up. And unlike the last 3 years, we have some big shifts in energy with Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto all changing signs in 2023. So the pace is going to pick up. For sure, the pace is going to pick up. And it's a much clearer year, I think, of beginnings and endings. We're going to get some very clear signs of beginnings with communities really starting to form and consolidate and really adding to that grid of light around the earth. Many more green shoots of new earth appearing in terms of how we are creating a much more loving world, much closer to nature, I think. But equally, the endings will be very loud. If anything, the endings will get louder, but a little, well, I think actually a lot more hollow, let us say. It is because the energy is just not there to sustain those old systems and structures any longer. So it's going to be quite dramatic. So some of the themes we're going to see in this, some of these actually aren't just for 2023, because once Pluto, and I'm going to be talking about this in a moment, but once Pluto starts its move into Aquarius in March 2023, it's actually the beginning of a very long-term transit of Pluto in Aquarius until 2044. So 22 years from 21 years from now, really. And so for many of us, that will be for the rest of our lives. So some of these themes I'm talking about will be that long lasting, not just for this this year, 2023. The shift is very much, although it may appear to the contrary initially, is going to be more localized and decentralized. Some of the things I'm talking about, because I've gone back historically to look at what happened last time with these shifts of planets into these signs, that's why I can feel fairly sure that they are going to repeat in the same way, because they always have. And that's why that gives me a lot of reassurance, and I hope it will give you a lot of reassurance too. For instance, one of the big shifts is that I'll go through the themes first of all, and then I'll come back and take each of those planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, separately and talk about them in a little more detail. So Pluto is the planet of power, and it has been in Capricorn, which is top-down structures, governments, corporations, institutions, which have held power over us. They tend to be vertical structures. Often they have elite people at the top, and we poor people at the bottom. That system supports inequality, really, in power, in wealth, in many things. So with Pluto being the planet of power, it's been moving through Capricorn since 2008, and it is about to start its move into Aquarius, as I say, in March 23. And being the planet of power, it will shift from those top-down structures to begin to shift to the people. Now, this won't happen in a day, a week, a month, even a year, but it will begin the shift back to the people, because it always has in all the historical cycles. And I'll give you some examples as we move through this. I think it's very much a time of finding your unique essence, very much finding your unique role in this massive evolution for humanity that we're going through at the moment. And Aquarius is quite a contradictory, quite a paradoxical energy, in that you feel more unique than you ever have before, but also you are more plugged into a community, or that would be a good place for you to be, than you have ever been before. So it's this kind of slight paradox of you feel more individual, but you are more aware of the very special, unique contribution you can make to that community locally, but also to the global community. And that's Aquarian energy. Going to be much more grassroots up, much more localized, decentralized, communities, collaboration, coming together, sharing, helping. That's Aquarian energy. So in that sense, it's going to be very important to find your family of frequency, find your soul tribe, find the people that you naturally link with, that you don't have to chop bits of yourself off to be yourself when you're with those people. Hopefully you can find those physically for real and meet them in person, but even if you can't, online is a good way to go as well. So, but there are going to be huge amounts of revelation and disclosure this year. It's absolutely, the lids are popping off wherever you look. So an enormous amount of revelation and disclosure. It's interesting that we're in a period from last October until April 23 that we have 7 full moons in a row at 16 degrees of their sign. And somebody mentioned to me that the 16th card in the tarot is the Tower. And we are at a Tower moment, for sure. We are at a Tower moment. But there are many, many other signs of new beginnings, whether you just look at 5 new moons in a row, it's at 1 degree of their sign, or you look up to the bigger and bigger and bigger cycles, 12,000 years, 26,000 years. We are inevitably, whichever way you look, outer planets changing signs, some Kuiper belt objects, dwarf planets like Sedna, Manwe, Haumea also changing sign, and they have very, very slow orbits. Whichever way you cut the astrological cake, it is very clear that we're moving into a whole new episode. And actually, even if we look at the next sort of 3-4 years, from 2023 to 2026, all of the outer planets are changing sign. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and that's extremely rare. You have to go back round about 300 years to find what happened during those periods. And actually there were times of huge creativity, cultural blossoming, renaissance for humanity. So that's very promising too. But absolutely no doubt, this is a massive period of transition and change. And I think that 2023 is a real watershed year in that sense. A lot of what has been hidden is going to come to light. And I don't just mean the revelations and disclosures. I really mean sort of many long-term things, very long-term things that have been going on behind the scenes that also come to light. But our galactic heritage that's been hidden, I think, will come to light in a much bigger way, stepping back into our galactic citizenry. And also things like the nature of our reality. What is our reality and how do we form our reality? I think that is also going to come to light, and I'm going to be touching on that a little bit as we move through. I also think it is a paradigm shattering time that we're moving into. Remember, this is just the beginning, because I'm partly referring here to Pluto in Aquarius, and that's going to last, remember, till 2044. But as we move through these years, I fully expect my whole understanding of the cosmos, the universe, the galaxies to change out of all recognition. And I'm open to that. It's start again time, a whole new canvas. I also think by the end of 2023, even, we are going to be in a very different place as humanity than we are right now at the end of 2022. But remember, we bring the astrology alive. Remember that if you look at any chart, any birth chart for any moment, it's just a flat piece of paper. It's a 2D piece of paper. It doesn't manifest, it doesn't come alive until we interact with it. So remember that we are such a big part of manifesting new earth. Astrology is half of the picture, as I say more and more these days. It is what our energy, our frequency, our consciousness is bringing to that astrology to weave with the planetary consciousness to make manifest the world we see around us. And increasingly, I'm seeing the planets not just as spinning rocks, which clearly they are as well, but as particular frequencies of consciousness. They each, I think Pythagoras was right when he talked about the harmony of the spheres, a couple of thousand years ago, that each planet has a particular resonance, note, pitch, frequency, whatever you want to call it, that represents a particular consciousness with which we are interacting. And I think we'll discover a lot more about that as well. Another big theme is I think we'll discover a lot more about everything. You, me, the whole world being energy and frequency. If you think of the two jaggedy lines of the glyph of Aquarius, it's all about energy and frequency, for the good and for the bad. We're going to really get a much deeper understanding of that. I think there will be a great deal of financial volatility this year, a great deal. The direction of travel is digital, absolutely for sure, because Uranus, which represents digitization, is in Taurus. That's to do with currencies, wealth, money, stock markets, etc. And the North Node also remains, and Uranus stays there till 2026. The North Node stays in Taurus until July 2023. So I think a lot of the volatility may happen in the first half, stock markets, currencies, etc. And it may be particularly even in late January. 22nd of January, we have Uranus, that eruptive, shocking planet becoming stationary direct. And that a few days around that day, 22nd of January, we could see some volatility financially. And indeed, from that day, 22nd of January, all of the planets are moving direct, quite unusual, until early May, when Pluto then starts to move retrograde. So that's a great time to move projects ahead. But it also suggests this paciness, this speed that we are going to be experiencing. And Jupiter in Aries is part of that until May. Jupiter stays in Aries. And again, let me talk about that in more detail in a moment, until May. I think there will be an increasing distrust of the old systems of all kinds. Now, that's partly the South Node in Scorpio until July. But it's also, I think, very much linked to Saturn in Pisces. Pisces, disillusionment, distrust, Saturn, the old systems. And whether those systems are political, medical, financial, legal, educational, I think it's right across the board. If you even look at surveys with people now, that's becoming very apparent. For sure, our world will become much more digitized. We're going to see a lot more AI, a lot more robotics, robots taking over very repetitive labor. And that's going to throw up whole issues about social structure. And if your job is now taken by a robot, what does that mean for you in terms of your income, your daily routine? There's some very, very big questions around this. We are already seeing many, many, many beneficial healing technologies coming out at this time. But also, I think one of the huge, huge obvious themes is this big fork in the road of our choices, because one fork in the road is very clearly to do with technocracy, and AI, and the other road is not the other. It's kind of fear and love, and they are very different and diverging increasingly. The space between them is getting wider and wider, and so in those micro decisions through your day, be aware of the choices you're making. I mean, I've said many times that I principally live without a mobile phone, very deliberately and consciously. I'll turn it on about once a month if I need it to get a 4-digit verification code for something or other. But the rest of the time, I have it switched off. And I only take it with me if I'm going on a significant journey. But I very consciously and deliberately live without that mobile phone. And as I've mentioned, if you look at YouTube's talking about the Chinese social credit system, you'll perhaps get an understanding of why I live like that. But I want to live very simply. I have to use computer, but I live as close to nature as I can possibly do. So in those micro decisions in your day, things, this is a challenging area because for people who suffer from diabetes type 1, they can get a microchip which releases the correct amount of insulin for them so they don't have to inject through the day. Or for people who've been paralyzed in an accident or whatever, they can also get a microchip, a brain implant to help them walk again. I mean, fabulous. I mean, absolutely life-changing. But if it's just merely for convenience, in Sweden for some time, it's been possible to have a chip and you can buy your train ticket faster. um, these are individual choices, but it's a slippery slope, isn't it? So discernment is needed because this is going to move at a pace. This whole area of digitization is going to move very, very quickly. So I think we have to be extremely conscious and aware, as I say, as we move through our daily choices. What does it mean to be human? That's the fundamental question. What does it mean to be human? And do we want to stay fully organically human? I know which way my vote is going to go. Because one of the shadow sides of Pluto in Aquarius, if you literally take that symbolism, is controlled by technology. And that's what we're seeing in China. A lot more space travel, I think huge jumps in aviation. Another big theme because Pluto moving into Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Uranus in myth is the sky god. So there's always been a link to aviation. So I think we're going to see big jumps in all kinds of aviation, speed of aviation, and also space travel, galactic travel. Last year, an airport started in North England. They started to build an airport in Northern England for flying cars. Isn't that remarkable? I think we'll all be living in, or not living in, but experiencing flying cars in our lifetime. So I think the technology is going to go in massive jumps, but so is our consciousness. That's one of the big game changers. Our consciousness for many, many people, or the potential was there for everyone to take a leap in their consciousness at the Capricorn solstice, another very big opportunity at the March equinox, and that is going to continue to go in quantum leaps through next year. This is one of the really big game changers. So when we're looking at the astrology, and as I've said before, I, just like all the astrologers, look back historically, previous cycles, just like the weather or economics, and say, okay, what happened last time? What can we intelligently estimate will be coming up this time? But they're big game changers, like these shifts in consciousness, which have been predicted by ancient prophecies for so long. It's a very exciting time to be here, but it can be an uncomfortable time to be here because of the challenges and the speed at which they're happening. So that's why we've got to find this kind of anchor in ourselves that I talk about in pretty much every update I put out. So let's talk about some of the important planets, planetary positions and movements this year. Jupiter is going to stay in Aries. It's right at the beginning of Aries right now. It's going to stay in Aries until May and then move into Taurus. And while it's in Aries, it's going to, it can expand because Aries is the sign of the warrior, can expand warlike events. Yes, it can. And it can also expand the military presence. If there is a military presence in your country, don't necessarily think that that is a bad thing. That's all I want to say about that. But don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But on the very obvious positive side, as I've spoken before, this is about your independence, your individuality, your uniqueness, your sovereignty, your sense of autonomy. This may lead to more self-employment, going your own way, standing strong in your warrior energy. I know who I am. The kind of signature for Aries is I am, and Jupiter is going to expand that strong sense of self, that unique essence. But again, how do we feed it back to our community, local and global? And almost as Jupiter leaves Aries and moves into Taurus, and that will really help us to connect back to nature and the earth, I think, in a much bigger way. Taurus, fixed earth. But as Jupiter leaves, pretty much the North Node starts to move into Aries for 18 months, the following 18 months till the end of 2024. And so it picks up the baton, if you like, for all of those things I've just talked about. So there will be, for all of us, I think, or certainly available to us, the energy to step into that autonomy, that sovereignty, that stronger sense of, I know who I am. And I'm very strong in that energy, not in a violent or aggressive way, but I'm standing in my center and in my anchor, and I'm standing my ground. So that is Jupiter and its moves. As I say, self-sufficiency is a big part of this as well. And then let's move to Saturn, because Saturn has been moving through Aquarius since March 2020. And it moved into Aquarius, I think it was the 22nd of March 2020. Aquarius is the sign of freedom. Saturn is limitation. It's very interesting that stayed in Aquarius, and it will stay in Aquarius until the 8th of March this year. And freedoms have been limited. I think it's very fair to say. I think we'd all agree with that over the last 3 years. So there's a shift as Saturn moves out of that sign and into Pisces until 2025. So let us hope that that brings with it more freedom. It's very interesting. Saturn, Aquarius is about the internet because it's digital. Think of those two jaggedy lines, and Saturn setting up new social structures, new communities, and those are certainly being birthed over the last 3 years. It's interesting that if I look back in history, because Saturn has a 29-year cycle, that around 29 years ago, it was really in 1994, that the World Wide Web started to become much more publicly available. Websites started to become much more publicly available in 1994. And we are now entering the Saturn return, if you like, for the internet, for the World Wide Web. And it was interesting, I was listening to an interview just this morning by the founder of the World Wide Web, the guy who originated it, developed it. And he, very interestingly, was saying that maybe, like driver's licenses, we should have internet licenses to use the internet. It'll be interesting to see what qualifications you need for that. The internet coming of age, the internet having a reality check in some way. It's experiencing its Saturn return. So some very interesting themes around Saturn's move into Pisces. There may be more that will emerge, and I'll think of as we move through this whole period, because I say it's going to last until 2025, but certainly Jupiter a year or so ago, and now Saturn, they've been the kind of John the Baptists setting up this Aquarius energy before Pluto moves in on the 23rd of March. So they've been the They've been the runners ahead, and that's why we've already seen quite a lot of Aquarius energy to do with freedom, human rights, civil rights, humanitarianism. Huge themes for 2023 and ongoing. Massive. So Saturn moving into Pisces, 8th of March. We could see a lot of issues emerging around water. Pisces is water, a very sensitive water sign ruled by Neptune, Lord of the Sea. I'm going to talk about water more in a moment, but it also, Pisces rules the blood. It also is connected to the immune system. So we could see issues around those things. Saturn issues, limitations, challenges around those things connected to Pisces. A little bit, as I was saying a moment ago, there's this sense of disillusionment, Pisces, loss of trust in top-down structures, traditional structures. Saturn rules Capricorn. We've had 10 tons of Capricorn since 2008, top-down structures. So also, and I'm talking about the, the more difficult side of Saturn in Pisces here, because there's some beautiful sides. It could also bring up, and this is really linking together with Pluto in Aquarius too, because Aquarius is kind of high-pitched mental energy, kind of, it's interference on the television, as it were. But Pisces, because of that slight shadow side of I'm the victim, there can be, with Saturn there, a kind of paranoia or mental health issues coming into play, and also almost a sense of, do we know what our reality is? Because Pisces can be the illusion, the film set, the movie, the gossamer. Do we really know what our reality is made of? And again, I'm going to come back to that in a more helpful way, I hope, in a moment. There could be, because Saturn is connected to rules and regulations, greater regulation around spirituality in some way. But what I like to think of in preference to that is the legitimization of spirituality, because I really see Saturn in Pisces as a blending of the science and the spiritual. Bring it on, I say, because in order to move forwards in our spirituality, I think that's incredibly helpful if we get a better understanding of the science. So a blending of science and spiritual and spirituality. We could see more spiritual masters. Saturn is the master. Pisces spiritual, more spiritual masters coming to the fore. Again, use discernment with those, always. Much more about, I think, our own spiritual mastery. Our own spiritual mastery and our own spiritual integrity. Saturn, integrity, big word. Always walk your talk, always speak your truth, always be authentic. And then you won't go wrong. You'll be fine. It's also about making real the dream. Pisces is the dream, and Saturn is, okay, I'm going to get real with this. And perhaps taking your spiritual ideals that have been kind of ether up to now and saying, okay, I am going to put these into practice in the real world on a daily basis. I'm going to make them real. So it's about the practical application, if you like, of your spiritual ideals. It's very much about spiritual service as well, Saturn in Pisces. There's a devotion that comes in with this that is very beautiful. But I do think it's, and this really feeds into Pluto moving through the last few degrees of Capricorn that I've talked about, I think, ad infinitum, the dissolving of those old structures, because Pluto is going to be moving through those last 2 or 3 degrees of Capricorn. I'll come to that in a moment, but it's completely moved out of Capricorn by December 2024. And this Saturn in Pisces is also about dissolving Pisces structures, traditional structures, Saturn. I think we may well either find structures underwater, ancient, Saturn is the ancient, so it could be ancient cities, that kind of thing that we find underwater. We may build something underwater. I mean, it's interesting, one of the previous times Saturn was in Pisces was when the Channel Tunnel was built between Britain and Europe. I mean, that was a masterpiece, going under the water. We may see cities or large areas being built, Saturn, on the water, Pisces. But what I started to get very excited about was I thought, this is about the structure of water, Saturn structure, Pisces water. And by chance, well, first of all, you're all probably very familiar with the work of Masaru Emoto. I wrote about him in my first book and the amazing work he did with water crystals. And if you don't know, it's ever so easy to find his images online, but he would take samples of water and he would ask people to direct very specific emotions to the water, like love, joy, gratitude, hate, anger, jealousy, whatever they were instructed to do. And then he would freeze the water and photograph the subsequent crystals. And with the positive, loving emotions, the crystals were exquisite. They were symmetrical and beautiful. And with the negative emotions, they were very distorted and ugly. So there is 10 tons of evidence out in the world now that consciousness affects matter. But very clearly, consciousness also affects structure, the structure of water. What are we? We are principally made up of water. I understand that by molecular count, we are 99% water. So water really, really matters a lot. Because if you think we are just in the flow of water, water is a life force that we need. We can't exist without water. So we take water in, but it also, we urinate it out. Water just flowing through. We're part of the flow of life in that way. And by chance, I came across the website of a lady called Veda Austin, Veda Austin. And this was just a few days ago. She doesn't know at all who I am or that I'm mentioning her, but she has taken the Masaru Emoto work one giant step forwards. And her work is really beautiful, VedaAustin.com. And what she's doing is some exquisite photography. She calls it crystallography on her website, because what she does is kind of capture the state of water in between a liquid and a solid, when it's just in its very early stages of becoming frozen, and it freezes in layers, which is very interesting. And that's when she captures the images of what can we see in the water. And it's very interesting that with tap water, because it goes through right angles and has, heaven knows what in it, that the structure is just completely broken. There is no structure to it. It's just kind of dots and blotches. But if she takes very pure spring water, she lives in New Zealand, then she gets these exquisite sort of ferns and leaves. And if she takes seawater, she got the image of a fish appearing in the crystal. But she's taken that a step forward, and I love her work actually, because she's now going beyond just imprinting thoughts, or imprinting images onto the water to form crystal. She's going beyond that. She's actually starting to, I'm going so goosebumpy now, she's starting to have almost telepathic conversations with the water. So listen to some of her work, because she is really saying, and I am absolutely in this camp, that water is living consciousness. It's living consciousness. And a few months ago, you might remember me saying, or having doing that interview with Professor Robert Temple, who wrote that groundbreaking book of a New Science of Heaven, because he says that 99% of our universe is plasma that takes different forms. It could be a liquid, gas, whatever, it takes different forms, and that we shape and steer the plasma with our minds, with our thinking, with our emotion. So in the conversation I had, I was suggesting that that we are forming in this air, in this ether, in this nothing. We think it's nothing, but it's plasma. All the time with our thoughts and emotions, we are forming either beautiful, coherent geometry, or very irregular, incoherent geometry. And just like we see in the water crystals, that's happening 24/7, whether we know it or not. And therefore, we are either creating through positive emotion, beautiful images, a beautiful reality, beautiful events and experiences that are going to bounce back to us, or not so good experiences because we've created incoherent geometry by being in negativity. I hope I'm making sense here. But what I find exciting about Veda's work is you can see it. You can see it. So that gives us the interim step to understanding how we create our reality. Gives us the interim. Not only does it tell us we should be drinking great water, structured water, and that's going to become a much bigger issue as we move forwards, but we can physically start to see how we are interacting with the divine living consciousness that I believe is not just the water, it's the plasma all around us. So this starts to give us a much greater sense of empowerment, I think, but also much greater collective responsibility, because we're not just doing this for ourselves, we are affecting the collective in every moment. So every thought and feeling we have is either getting us closer to New Earth collectively or slowing us up. That's why I feel so incredibly, incredibly passionate about this. Okay, so I'm sure there are many, many other aspects of Saturn in Pisces that we're going to come across, but those are the big ones that have occurred to me so far. So let us now talk about Pluto moving into Aquarius. It only moves into Aquarius very briefly from the 23rd of March until the 11th of June. So about 2.5 months in total in 2023. The rest of the time it is in Capricorn, backs up into Capricorn on the 11th of June. And so it only spends, as I say, less than 3 months in Aquarius in 2023, but it will give us a glimpse of what's to come. So be aware of how you're interacting with that energy. In 2024, it only spends about 3 months in Capricorn and about 9 months in Aquarius. And then December 24 fully moves into Aquarius. So we are going to get a much, much, much more Aquarian year in 2024 than we are in 2023. But nevertheless, we are going to get some clear themes and messages from March onwards about what that's about. So this reinforces this whole idea of endings and beginnings. Now, this is a more astrological point because what Pluto is going to do in that crisscrossing of that 0 degrees of Aquarius moving forwards, retrograding, moving forwards, retrograding, it's going to cross 0 degrees of Aquarius 5 times. That is already a very activated degree, because the astrologers amongst you will remember in the Capricorn solstice, December 2020, we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 of Aquarius. And that set up a whole new, it's actually 140 years, but very often it's 200-year cycle of the repeating Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in air signs. We've moved into a whole new era of air signs. So Pluto is going to be activating this very powerfully every time it crisscrosses over the next 2 years. It's very interesting. Aquarius, the sign of freedom, the sign of humanitarianism, the sign of human rights, civil rights, that in a previous air sign era, this was in March 1226, and I do mean 1226, Jupiter and Saturn were then in Aquarius at that time, and that was when the Magna Carta was created in England, which was the first document to establish civil rights that stated that the citizens had rights and the king must follow the law. We've just re-entered that cycle again. Now, thanks to astrologer Ray Merriman for reminding us of that. That is one example. I'm going to give you some more in a moment of how there can be this shift of power back to the people, even a legal recognition. Now, I know things have been kicked about a lot of late, but nevertheless, the pendulum is swinging back to the power being with the people. And it's not all going to happen in 2023. It's just the beginning of it. An example I've quoted several times in other videos was when we had the very greedy monarchy in France of Louis XVI. The peasants couldn't afford to buy bread. They eventually, 14th of July, 1789, they stormed the Bastille and they took down the French monarchy. And the monarch was executed, and the monarchy was no more in France. It's been a republic since that time. And it was just a month later. I mean, incredible. It was just 1 month later, in August of 1789, that the Assemblée Nationale published a document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man. And this was a document that guaranteed freedom and equality before the law. And it became the basis, that document became the basis of democracy in Europe. Now, again, that's been kicked about a bit, but we are moving back into that same cycle. It's interesting, if I look back further with Pluto in Aquarius, in 1293, Edward I established English common law. Again, Pluto in Aquarius. Isn't that interesting? So there's some very clear themes here of the power shifting back to the people. But we have to embrace that. Embrace that in terms of a divine consciousness. Not, out there being violent and shouting, a divine consciousness. We can be out there and peaceful, and we can be out there and meditating. We can be out there sending out love to the world, but anger tends to beget anger. So I know many people have very different views about this, but just know that the cosmic winds are with us in terms of the power shifting back to the people. Expect very big political and social changes over the next 20 years or so. An enormous number of scientific and technological advances. It's going to go fast. It's going to be, even in a few years' time, it's going to be unrecognizable in terms of where we are right now. Pluto's process always, as it moves into a sign, is to intensify the nature of that sign, but also to reveal the shadow side, any lack of integrity, accountability, transparency linked to the symbolism of that sign. So Pluto will intensify and accelerate Aquarius themes. So science, technology, aviation, all of that, but also digitization, control by technology, that whole fork in the road. But it will also, on the other side, increase the demand for more human rights and freedom. Here's the big split. But it will also, because that's its process, start to reveal the shadow side of science and technology. And I think all of us would think that's a good idea. Okay, it's also a move. Aquarius energy, as I mentioned, is decentralized. I think everything will eventually become decentralized. And remember, I'm talking about over the next 20 years or so. Health, look at the People's Health Alliance. Food networks, look at the People's Food and Farming Alliance. I know there are many equivalents all over the world. I think decentralized media. I think a lot more social media channels that are very specific to certain groups. It could even break down into certain specific internets, not just one overall internet. I think we may even have localized microcurrencies. Everything is moving towards being digital. But also remember that we have a move with the North Node in Taurus until July, and also with Jupiter moving into Taurus in May, that we have a move towards the simple, the move towards the earth, the move towards nature. And that is a massive part of New Earth. We are moving back to this Lemurian energy. We are being part of the divine flow of nature, part of the oneness, part of the connection, telepathy with animals, plants, trees, all of it, seeing ourselves as one integral part of the whole. And it's going to be heart-based. It's going to be loving and heart-based, certainly on the love path, that's for sure. We're going to recognize, as I said earlier, that everything is energy and frequency, and how we can use that to our benefit, to be very aware of what we individually are broadcasting. Capricorn, because it's ruled by Saturn. Saturn is in myth Kronos, Lord of Time. It's connected to old age. And so typically in the last, well, most of our lifetimes, we've been ruled by the leaders have been old greybeards, if you like. The people in power have been older. It's now going to shift to youth, because Aquarius, ruled by Uranus, is very linked to youth. And it isn't going to be this top-down leadership. It's going to be innovators, progressives, ideas people, people who are ahead of their time, and teams, groups of people will assemble around their ideas to support them and accelerate them. It's going to be that kind of thing. It's going to be grassroots up, not top down. This, of course, will come as music to many of your ears, is going to link into many, I think, rejuvenation technology. It's going to be a lot about youth, a lot about turning the clock back, a lot about rejuvenation. So that's very exciting, because that's going to support much longer lives for many of us. And freedom is the big deal. More galactic contact for sure. I think that's very clear as we move through the next few years. Paradigm shattering, for sure. Our worldviews, our belief systems, even minus an astrologer, I think are going to hit the wall in these next few years. Aquarius is the energy of revolution. Look at Brazil, look at China, look at Iran, look at Germany, look at the Netherlands, look at many countries across the world. Revolution, standing for freedom and human rights, community, collaboration, big themes for Aquarius. It's interesting that Pluto is also linked to debt, but also taxes. And looking back to 1789, when there was that absolutely cataclysmic shift from the top-down structure of the very abusively wealthy monarchy to starving peasants, what happened subsequently to that, as the monarchy fell, over the coming months and next couple of years, there was a major change in the tax structure, because the benefits that the aristocracy, the very wealthy people, had enjoyed, they started to be eroded, and more financial privileges started to be given to the poorer people. Now, this didn't result in an equal society by any means, but it became a slightly more equitable society than the extreme inequality that they had before. So expect that. Expect a reduction in the inequality and a shift towards more equability as well. Because Capricorn top-down favors, as I say, elitism and inequality. So also remember, the elephant in the room here is the US Pluto return. That's in the second house of the country's economy, values. I think it's, as I've said many times, going to change the whole nature of who the US is, spiritually, economically, politically, legally, constitutionally, geographically, the whole lot. And it's in that process right now. And whatever is unfolding in the US is going to color how this Pluto in Aquarius starts to play out. Remember, we haven't got a film set. We have not got a future that's set like blancmange. We are creating it in every moment. Tomorrow is invisible. And that is great to know, because you and I right now can step into our power of love and say, I'm going to weave a tapestry of love for tomorrow. I'm going to link with other like-minded people across the world. I'm going to tone the note of love. I'm going to hum love. I'm going to meditate and visualize a community, a grid of light being strengthened in every moment. I'm going to shine my light ever brighter. I'm going to be a lighthouse in the storm. I'm going to stand rock steady as the seas and the storms rage around me. And I'm going to shine my light brightly, because that will literally infect other people with my light. If we could all do that, boy, we'd shift the energy in our world. And just remember that the game changers here, the game changers are the light, the amount of light that's coming onto our Earth, which is extraordinary, the amount of cosmic and galactic energy, We're entering, I think, solar cycle 25. The sun is very active. We're receiving a lot more cosmic and galactic energy than we have probably in many lifetimes. Both of those sets of information are bringing in new information for us to upgrade. Game changer, big time game changer. Only certainly the photonic band that we're moving through, we only do that every 12,000 years, give or take 500. So know that we are being helped enormously by that. That is resulting in big jumps in consciousness for us. I believe personally that we are stepping back into becoming full members of the galaxy. I understand from spiritually minded people that we were kind of offline for some time, but we're now kind of stepping back into that role, and therefore the galactic beings, the benevolent galactic beings that are all around us, are actually supporting us in that cause and ready and waiting for our re-entry, which is happening now. Just keep it, when all of this is too complicated, I always go back to the simple. I go back to nature, I go back to my heart, I go back to my breath. I go back to sitting in a wood and throwing sticks in a stream for my neighbor's dog. I just go back to the simple and just keep focusing on what you want to create, even just energetically. What do you want to create to make a more beautiful world? Just feel love, just feel joy, just feel gratitude. And keep on with that mantra of, I am welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. I am welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love, and you'll be on the right track. So a much, much bigger year of change, of speed, of kind of hairpin twists and turns as we go, but just stay steady. Stay in nature, stay in your heart, stay in your breath, as I say, and just keep welcoming in that expanded consciousness of love, which is just beaming down on us right now. And it is an incredibly exciting time to be alive. Yes, it's challenging. Yes, we're going to see a lot of demolition. Yes, we're going to see a lot of chaos, for sure. But we can kind of bubble wrap ourselves to some extent. Remember the analogy I've used of being in the plane and experiencing turbulence, or if we break the cloud level, we get a smoother ride. Shift your frequency upwards, and there's a sense of some insulation, some bubble wrapping from the worst excesses of the demolition, which is definitely, for sure, it's happening. I mean, it's happening right now. I think we're all aware of that. A lot there, going to be digging into the detail as the months go by. I hope that's really helped you and given you a bigger perspective. I actually find the astrology, although these times are challenging, very reassuring, because I go back to the historical cycles, and nobody can stop the astrology. That's unstoppable. Nobody can stop the photonic light. That's unstoppable. Nobody can stop the cosmic galactic energy. That's unstoppable. So we are on our way, guys. And I just wish you many blessings and much love as we enter a massive year of change, revelation, disclosure, and progress. God bless. Thanks so much for listening. This was a very long video. Bye for now.